Hey everybody, I'm back. This is AJ Ali, and this is episode 3 of the Love is the Answer video podcast. I am so excited to bring you Evan Money today. I'm going to read a little bit about his bio and then bring him in. Happily married, #1 best-selling author and global entrepreneur. Evan and his bride remarry in a different state or country every year. They homeschool their 2 amazing children and live in majestic Rancho Palos Verdes, California, right down the street from me.
Woohoo!
Evan has been interviewed and featured on ABC, NBC, CBS, The Wall Street Journal, Success, and Fast Company magazine, and many others. Evan co-wrote and produced the groundbreaking documentary Words of Art, starring Joel Osteen, Darren Hardy, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, and Dennis Waitley, and some other cool people in there as well. I've seen it. It's amazing. It's available on Amazon Prime. Evan now spends his time guiding and mentoring people of greatness. You can check him out on Instagram at Evan Loves Susan. Evan, welcome, my friend.
Hey, Jay, what an honor to be here with another man of greatness like yourself. Again, so excited. Looking forward to it.
Oh, man. It's always awesome talking with you, and I'm so excited to share you with our viewers because you're just, to me, you've always been very uplifting. You've been very inspiring. You've been a true friend. We've known each other many years, and just appreciate you, man. I'm glad to have you here.
No, when I got the email way back when you said, hey, I'm working on this movie, you come to the premiere, I felt like a proud parent because I had done some of my films, and then to see you kind of on your journey, and it was just so incredible. I still remember, AJ, we were in L.A. and we were you had some incredible venue, some billion-dollar venue. I was like, man, how did you get in here? And the mayor was there. You had all these, city people, and just watching that doc was so incredible, and just the journey and watching the healing afterwards and the discussions. I was just like, I know that guy. Yes.
It seems like so long ago. It was only 3 years ago that the film Walking While Black, Love is the Answer came out at the Broad Stage in Santa Monica, red carpet. It was an amazing night. We've been all over the country with it, and over 35,000 people have seen it. 400 plus, I think it was about 475 saw it that night at the premiere, and more than 35,000 people have seen it and participated in our workshops and other programming since then. So it was exciting, man. And since we're both filmmakers, it's always good to chat with another filmmaker doing great stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about Words of Art, man, because that was an incredible film that people can catch on Amazon Prime. And I just want to, hear a little bit from you about what that film meant to you and how it maybe even changed your life a little bit.
Wow. So I'm gonna go. It's spring 2020, like we were talking about off air. So there's a lot of things that are happening that don't normally happen. So I'm gonna really kind of lead off in, normally you're supposed to like, okay, let's connect with the audience and let's find common ground and all this. And so I'm gonna go way deep, like with guys. I think especially you have to go bone marrow deep in the beginning, or you'll stay on the surface forever. So I'm gonna do a super dive, and hopefully I won't lose anybody, but. One of my biggest struggles in living in Los Angeles and being born and raised here is I have been self-diagnosed, #1, as an ADD visionary. Number two is I am overcoming compare-itis. And every time, compare-itis, yes. Every time I think I've got it under control, it'll break out, suddenly somewhere else. And just, it seems like everybody else is doing bigger and better things, and everybody's stuff is more impactful. And it's like, oh man, my little movies and all this stuff. And I can honestly say with you, AJ, it was so encouraging because all I felt was just love and admiration for you watching this project. And I think, I think there's that love connection that we have of our faith and just being at a deeper level of like, hey, it wasn't like, hey, look at me, look at me. It was all about, hey, look at this message. Look at this message I'm trying to bring out there. And so it was, again, that premiere night was so healing for me. So from another filmmaker, not to suffer compare-itis was just like, oh, this is awesome. And then this is such an awesome message. And oh, this is that. So I could go on, but I appreciate you letting me share a little about some of our docs. And and that's what I love about the documentary journey is there's no rules, there's no guidelines that you can really, for better or for worse, right? You can tell a different kind of story. But for my films, what I didn't want to do, because you've seen them as well, and that's what I love. Your movie isn't this either, but there's a couple different kind of documentaries. There's a slant-umentary, S-L-A-N-T, slant-umentary, which is I'm going to go do these interviews, and no matter what people say, I'm going to edit it to make it say what I want to say, from my point of view, right?
And you can do that, and people do that all the time.
Oh, yeah. Yep. So I'm just like, I don't want to do a slant-umentary. That's not what I want to do. And it's really about, okay, what is this subject matter? What can we open up to? And with Words of Art, I went into it kind of open-ended, like, hey, I don't know where this road's going to go. I had my agenda, like, oh, I think it's going to be here, and we're going to spend 5 days with Joel Osteen, these big names, and yet the non-big names were actually the most impactful for a lot of people.
I agree. Yeah. I felt that way.
Yeah, so it was cool to go into it, and then as I got halfway through, like, hey, let's see where this leads. Let's see where this goes. Let's see what happens. And I can imagine, and I'm sure, your doc was kind of the same way, because there were, literally that could have been 5 documentaries, because there were so many stories where I'm like, oh, I want to hear more from that guy. Like, oh, tell me, no, now we're switching over. What about this guy? What about this guy? So I was just excited to, put it all together, see what we got. And then I have to give my director, Jeff Roldan, all the credit in the world, because working with me, number one, is not the easiest, because I'm Mr. Non-detail visionary, like, okay, we're going to fly over here. We're going to get this. We're going to get this. We're going to get this. And we ended up with 30 hours. We had 30 hours that we needed to trim down to 1 hour and 10. And I don't know how much, you probably had way more than that for yours.
We shot 65 hours.
Okay.
And the first cut of the film, when we thought we were done, right? Like done, it was 3.5 hours long, dude.
Lord of the Rings, yes, there we go.
So we ultimately had to cut it down to 90 minutes, which was torture, because we left a lot of stuff we thought was good out. So
yeah. So I'm thankful and I know you're a little more hands-on in that process, because me as the non-detail guy, we got everything I wanted to get, and then I didn't look at it until I got the rough cut back.
Okay.
And I realized, that was I was able to work in my skill sets, because you, like me, right? I wanted to keep every second, right? Like, no, the part where I'm picking my nose, keep that. That's going to be great. right. Shows I'm human. Yeah, we need it. So once, I think I got the rough cut at 1 hour 20, maybe 1 hour 25. And so I was able to just like, okay, let's trim this, let's cut, let's move, and then kind of massaged it. And so I get a lot of the credit, but it's really my director who did the big pieces and finding that common, that's the thing, you find that common thread that you can't identify at the beginning, because you don't know what people are going to say. And so he was able to weave that thread all the way through, and it was just truly magical. And then the last interview, that was, again, a zillion % unscripted, just his stories and the radio, and just about the lady who's, this is, kind of, you saved my life kind of, and was just like, wow, this is just some voice on the radio. So just to see it all work through was tremendous. But you and I, and all the other potential, whether you're making a 10-minute short for YouTube, whether you're making a full, full length, whatever, anybody that's done any kind of editing or filmmaking knows the journey.
Rough, baby.
This stopped being fun 3 months ago. We still gotta get it out there.
That's definitely the way it was for us. My team, they were phenomenal. Errol Weber and Lydia Hall doing the editing, and Errol with his lighting, which was world class. Dan Brown Jr. with all the music. He donated every single bit of music. So there were so many other people that helped. It took such a team effort to get it done. And I'm so glad it's over, man, because that was torture getting it done. But you came out with an excellent product. We're happy we came out with an excellent product. And now together we've got the follow-up to the film. We've got the Love is the Answer book, which you are one of the contributors to.
And that was, I was jumping up and down like a Mac icon when I got that email too, because I was like, I get to be a part of it. Oh my gosh, wow, woo! And then I sent it in, and I was waiting for the, sorry, this isn't the the viewpoint we're looking for. So I was honored. I have to tell the listeners, I was honored that AJ and I, you and I are brothers from another mother. We got the hairstyle. We're
definitely rocking the hairstyle.
We're in lockstep on a lot of things, but there's other things that we don't agree on.
Right.
We have different viewpoints, and we have different narratives, and it's like, but what I love about you is you're like, hey, I'm not afraid of Evan's viewpoint, and there's something I can learn from him. And it's the same with me. It's like, wow, there's something I can learn from AJ's viewpoint and his, and again, even though I may not agree, I can learn. And so I love that you are willing to include kind of my narrative, which is one very unique to the prototypical that was in the book. So just huge honor for me.
Well, I thought it was important, just like with the film, we included, I don't want to say both sides. We tried to include all sides.
Yes.
Say
that again.
Issue, right?
Say that again. That is huge. Say that again.
In the film, we included all sides of this issue. It's Walking While Black, Love is the Answer. The film is about racial profiling. It's about the divide between police and Black people and people of color in general. The book goes deeper into the solution areas of it, but I felt it was important with the film and the book to make sure that we had all these different viewpoints. We have in the film, half the people in the film have law enforcement background. Some of them, all of them have slightly different views. Some of them have widely different viewpoints, and I felt it was important. Same thing with the book. 29 contributors, to this book. It's 482 pages long. It's a master class in relationships, man.
Yeah.
And so the information that you provided was slightly different than everyone else's, and I thought, super important because you had some faith components, in there as well. And I think that without God, we can't solve any of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, here we are. The book came out in February. It's getting more popular. It's been incredibly difficult because of the coronavirus and the whole situation with the country being, pretty much on lockdown. We had 3 book signings and then everything shut down. So we're relying on social media and word of mouth and so forth to get the word out. And this podcast really grew out of this whole coronavirus situation, because we were doing screenings and workshops and signings and things where you gather in person. I didn't plan on doing a Love is the Answer podcast until a year from now. So we started doing this out of necessity now, and I'm really enjoying it, and I was super excited to know that you were in the lineup and we're going to be joining us today.
No, I love it. Virtual book signing. Here we go.
So look, let's talk about your story. Do you have your book handy?
Oh yeah. No, I'll give you a little bit.
Yeah. Why don't you read a little excerpt from your chapter? And for those of you, well, it's right there, but here I'll put it right in front of the camera. That's the cover of the book.
And when you have a bride as good looking as yours, put her on the cover, baby. We needed you. We needed less of you and more of her. Just saying.
Absolutely.
Get her on the cover. All right, here we go. Story time with Evan Money. So we're going to keep it short and sweet. But Academy Award-winning actor Louis Gossett Jr. says it best. There is only one race, the human race. MLK's iconic words still ring in my heart. I have a dream that one day my children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Yet we stomp all over his grave by the way we speak each and every day. Everyone is a color. Oh, this white guy over there, this color over there, this color over there. We describe everyone by their color of skin, by their ethnicity, and we do it all subconsciously. And by doing so, we rocket farther and farther away from MLK's dream every day. You see, it's not a color game. Rather, it's a culture game. Tiger Woods, Eminem, we're clearly raised in different cultures. Legendary running back, NFL running back Chris CK2K is championing this cause along with me. When asked at practice one day by the general manager's little boy, excuse me, Mr. Johnson, why do you have gold teeth? His response says it all. He said, oh, it's a culture thing. His skin color is irrelevant. So he refused to play the color game and talk about, oh, it's because of the color of my skin or this or this. He simply said, oh, it's a culture thing. So I encourage all of us to do the same. There is only one race, the human race.
Man, I love that. One of the joys of working on this book was to be able to read all of your stories, and yours in particular really hit me. You know, we need to get to that place.
Yes.
We got to get to that place.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And that's only part of it. There's a lot more good stuff, great stuff in your chapter. I've been told by several peace officers that, in fact, one of them bought a book and then turned around and got another one for a coworker. I've been told by many of them that who read it that this could be a game changer because of all the different views all leading to one place, which is quite simply, you know, how do we get to that place where we can learn how to love each other?
Yes, yes,
and where there's one race, one race, the human race.
Yes, and that's so. What you said was so, and that's why I wanted you to repeat it, because we're programmed to this. Oh, there's two sides to every story. No. There's all sides.
Yeah.
To every story, right?
Yes.
You know, this whole concept of, you know, we have this, you know, everyone's kind of figuring it out, right? It's the flat world economy, right? It's not like, well, what happens here doesn't affect over there. I mean, everybody understands we're in a flat world economy. It's also the same, you know, if you want to talk about the color game, you know, with all the DNA swabs and all this stuff, you know, it proves, you look at the chart, right? We're all everybody. There isn't like, oh, I'm this and you're that. It's like, what are you talking about? Look at the color chart.
Yeah.
You know, we're everywhere. So scientifically we know it.
Yeah.
You know, but it's about getting somehow through the dogma, and a lot of that's why I preface it, it all comes through language. And it's difficult, and I understand in the police side, you're trying to describe the characteristics of this person. I remember I had to call the police. There was a drunk driver weaving on the road that almost hit my son and I one night. And he ended up passing us, and he ended up crashing like 10 feet in front of us. Wow. And I'm like, should I call the police? I think I should call the police. So I'm calling the police on my way home, and they're, you know, and saying, okay, here's where we are. Here's what happened. You need to send a car. You know, there's chaos. There's all this stuff. And so they're like, well, describe the driver. And I'm like, oh, I don't talk that language, but I understand, like to them, everything is, hey, what's the color of their skin? What's this? To identify that person. But we're so culturally put in there, and it really comes down, I think, that biggest part of Louis Gossett Jr. to this language that we use. And so I call people on it all the time. Whenever they go, oh, this certain color over there, I'll say, hey, love has no race. And they kind of look at me like, what are you talking about? I'm like, and I'll just ask them, I'll say, what does the color of that person's skin have to do with anything? Well, I was describing him to you. I said, again, what does this color of skin have to do with anything? And they go, gosh, it really doesn't. And so you and I were talking off air. We have the grandparents over, and you know, and I'll be, again, very transparent at our dinner table. We let our children know, hey, our grandparents are accidental racists. They don't even know they're doing it. It's just subconscious. Like, you know, my grandmother knows we're into cars. And so she goes, oh, I saw this really cool car the other day, and this specific color guy was driving it. And I asked her, and I said, Grandma, what relevance is the color of the skin to the driver? And she's like, well, none, but I was just describing him to you. I'm like, does it really matter? She goes, no. But just would never think. But again, everything comes down to, oh, this color, this color, this color. So I have a young friend that a mentee of mine, and I remember sitting down with him and really dialing in. He goes, gosh, I never even realized this. You know, every time I describe someone, it starts with their skin color. And so I think that's one of the ways we can start, is just getting out of the color game and understanding the culture side of things. Because culture is legit. You are where you are from your culture. So, you know, you can't escape that. So it's that, okay, but the skin color is irrelevant to the culture. And so to me, it just comes from that intentionality of saying, okay, if I want to be judged by the content of my character, right? It starts with me. So how do I look past that and say, hey, I want to find this person's character content. So I have to start with that instead of, again, the skin color. So I can look at, okay, where's the content of the character? And then as we go deeper, I'll share this with you, because this may get into another one of your other questions. I still remember, because again, it's culture. So my son got picked up by the police a couple years back at 14 and a half. Okay. So again, you're on the west side, Santa Monica. I'm kind of in Palos Verdes, which, you know, many consider, you know, upper class, you know, high end, blah, blah, blah. So it's a unique, very rural, very open, very kind of high end-ish type community. So my son walked down the block to go trim the bougainvillea that separates the cul-de-sac. So we have a cul-de-sac, and there's all these trees and bougainvillea, and the city isn't always adamant about chopping it up. So he wants to get some exercise in. Hey, I'm going to go chop the bougainvillea. So he decided to carry his machete. Okay. He wore a black hat, black baseball hat. Okay. He had a bandana on, and he had a ripped shirt. Oh man. Okay.
And this is pre-COVID-19.
Oh yeah. This is about 2 years ago. So he's
not everyone was wearing a bandana.
Yeah. Exactly. So he's got the bandana, this black hat, and we're right on the border. So our city, the sheriff's patrol, and the city on the other side of the cul-de-sac has their own police department. So the police departments got multiple calls from multiple people. And I didn't get to hear the calls, but the way it was responded was there was gang activity, which doesn't exist in, you know, where we're at. And so I heard the police car flying up the street, and, you know, they tell as my son was walking back, it's like, son, drop the machete, get your hands on the curb, right? So the police comes flying up, and once he pulls over, and once he said, finally, once he ascertained what the situation was, the police officer calmed down and started to laugh, because he realized, this is just some kid with a machete. And one neighbor actually was supportive. She goes, oh no, officer, he was just chopping the weeds down. So he put my son in the car and drove him to our house, which is like a half a block. But I kid my son all the time. He's like, Dad, I didn't get arrested. I'm like, did they put you in the car? He's like, yeah, they put me in the car. They didn't handcuff me though. So we get the knock on the door, and there's the sheriff with my son. And he's like, just keep your son from brandishing the machete, and, you know, please don't wear these type of outfits, is basically what he said. So my son had to learn a lesson that it's not just, there is profiling, but it's also of, hey, what are you wearing? How are you carrying yourself? So it doesn't matter what color skin you have. When you got a black hat on and a bandana and a weapon in your hand, you know, it's like, hey, we're going to profile that. So it was really interesting to kind of see that reaction from the community, where there was no common sense. It was just like, oh my gosh, I see a black hat and a bandana. It must be a gang member. Call the police, right? So it's really interesting how far the narrative gets carried. So I wanted to kind of share that story, because I thought people would get a kick out of that.
You know, I'm glad that you and your son had that experience, and I'm glad that he didn't get hurt. You know, because that could have easily turned ugly. Yeah. The sad part about all of that right, is that there's so many people that are experiencing that kind of a situation, and they don't have a machete.
Yeah. Yeah.
They got on a hoodie.
Yep. Yep.
They don't even have on a bandana.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're just walking down the street minding their own business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we've got so far to go, right,
Mm-hmm.
to get out of this profiling.
Yeah.
And I had a peace officer, a friend of mine, explain to me how he was against profiling in the way that it's done most times. But he's all for profiling when it comes to, okay, if we know that a certain individual is a known whatever breaker of the law, right, and that person has these habits, and he is known to have these habits, and if he goes to a certain XYZ place, we know based on past performance that he's going to be doing something bad, right? That's good profiling.
Yes.
Right, because they're building a case based on facts.
Yes.
And history. They know but the profiling that is going on so much in our society, that subjected your son to probably a moment of fear and trepidation.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah. But I want to dive into that because I tell people all the time, it's like it doesn't matter, if you're wearing saggy baggies and a hoodie, okay, that's a red flag wherever you go. So if you take someone who's in saggy baggies and a hoodie, that's already 2 strikes against you, right? But if you're wearing a suit and a tie and you're in the same place at the same time, right? That's a whole different experience. And so
that's wrong. That's wrong of our society, right?
Part of it comes down to, but again, this is what the lesson from my son was of like, hey, you have to understand, son, that like we talk about all sides of the story, right? So if I look out my window and I see a 14, 15-year-old kid, with a low hat and a bandana, right? And a hoodie, whatever, right? It's like understanding, that's also part of it. Understanding the human nature and the fight flight and that's what I loved about, your film, Love is the Answer, really, because it helped me understand. Because a lot of people think like there's this divide between a certain color skin and law enforcement. And that is not true. There's a divide between all people and law enforcement. And so there is this, oh my gosh, as me growing up as in a very unique background, I was listening to NWA, I was championing F the police, I was a rebel, I was a lawbreaker, I had warrants. Okay, for parking tickets and moving violations. So I was the target, right, on the thing, because I was in that rebel, that mindset of anti-establishment, that whole thing. And so, but again, it just really understands that there's another side of it, right? Like we only see our side. We don't understand. That's what I loved about Love is the Answer. I got to see the police side of realizing like, wait a minute, what am I supposed to react? Like, hey, I want to go home and see my kids too. And I don't necessarily want to get in a gunfight. I don't necessarily want to be involved in this, but this is part of the job to say, this is the limited information I have. The screen shows me that there's priors, there's this, right? And I got to make a decision right now, right? So just by, a lot of it comes to in that position. And that's what was the talk with my son, was like, you got to understand, he has to make this thin slice. He gets a call. Yeah. He doesn't have time to talk to the lady on the phone. Well, tell me all about what's right. He just gets a call. We got a 459, a 211. I don't know what the code is, right? For, that whole thing. He goes by the code and then he has to process instantly. So what I loved about Love is the Answer is that I was like, oh, wow. I never got to see that side of the equation. And so whenever, I still remember the last time I got pulled over, I was like, hey, I got to keep my hands. It's at nighttime. And in our neighborhood, it's super dark. I got to keep my hands where they can see him. I got to help him understand like, hey, look, you get to go home with me. I'm not going to pull anything. But yeah, so I just love being able to see not just both sides, but all sides, and understand, like, okay, this is the thin side, but again, how do we get out of it, right? How do we prevent this? And how do we, and it's the classic, right? How do you be a police officer and not see the rest of the world that way all the time, right?
Yeah, it's a tough job. It's not the toughest job on the planet, but it's a tough job. And there's so much stress from every angle. You can go on 6 calls, and 4 of them might be really, really horrible. And us, when we're walking down the street and we wind up having an interaction with a peace officer, we don't know what their day has been like before they get to us.
Yes. Right? And that's what the movie, that was the big wide open one of understanding, like, oh my gosh, we don't know. Yeah. I don't know what they saw. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was talking about, I went from one call where I'm literally looking at the guy's brains on the sidewalk to the next call. And I don't have time to process that. Right. And it's just like, wow. So there's, again, this all sides of, like, again, it just comes down, again, 101 in the faith-based world, right? Yeah. Love others like yourself. So instead of making it all about me, right? Why am I getting pulled over? What? It's like saying, well, wait a minute, what experiences he had? How can I make it easier for him so we don't turn this into, something that it can't be? And again, it's easy mentally, but when it's happening, right? But I'll guarantee you, as soon as I stopped listening to F the police and started expanding my mind and growing as a person, it was like, oh, okay, you know what? Maybe that's not the best mindset. So it's, again, I'll be the first to admit the biggest room in my house, is the room for improvement. And so it's like, I can't assume that the police officer is going to be growing personally, but I can be growing and changing. I can say, hey, look, it shouldn't be this way. Instead of pointing the finger going, well, they need to, it's like, well, what can I do? Because especially now, right? Like, these times is a perfect example of perceived control. Like, you ask any restaurant owner, right? I'm in control, man. I got things rolling. We got 5 restaurants. We got this. Boom. Right?
Overnight, everything changes.
Yeah, overnight. So we all live in this perceived control world, right? So the only things we can control are our actions and our attitudes. Yeah. So it's the classic adage of, what? By cleaning my room first, that's going to affect my household, which will affect my neighborhood, which will affect my city, my county, my state, my country, and then the world. But it all has to start with me. And me growing and me becoming better, instead of they should have and they would ever. And that's why, instead of, I just challenge people to be better and say, hey, what's the one thing we can do? I can lock on to what Lou Gossett Jr. said, which is there's only one race. So since that is true, how does that change how I speak, how I talk, how I act, how I interact with people? And again, I just like everyone else, there's still times where my mind instantly wants to play the color game, wants to prejudge, want to do this, but I have to stop it and say, all right, let's back this up, because if I, again, be the change, right? Classic, be the change that, you want to see. Yeah. And so it's just a global call to say, okay, if love is the answer, let's start with me, start with me, and who can I love and who can I shift and change?
All right, party time.
I got Michael Jackson calling me. What's going on?
So, hey, let's talk about that for a second, right? Because we use the word love in an acronym form, right? And the first letter in love is for learn. And one of the things I learned about you early on is that you and your bride, you get married every year, not just once, but every single year, and you have a celebration, you have a theme. You are continually trying to learn more about each other. So that learn part of love, of that acronym, how is that continuous seeking and learning A, helped in your marriage, and B, how do you think we can apply that to the police community marriage?
Well, I have to, full disclosure, right? We started with that. So we get remarried a different state or country every year. And the primary driver for me is the honeymoon. So again, full disclosure, right? I had our first honeymoon and I was like, how do we repeat this process? This
Nice.
cannot be a one-time thing. How do we get in this mindset, this honeymoon mindset more often? And so that's, so again, so my bride and I, she's planning wedding number 27. I'm planning honeymoon 27. Woo-hoo!
Nice, nice.
We gotta be clear about that. So don't settle for less. Don't settle for just what. So for me, it really comes down to that mindset of saying, okay, how can we create and make it a lifestyle, right? So for me, from a marriage standpoint, again, all I saw living in Los Angeles. Now, this may not be everyone's experience, but again, my experience, all sides, right? So living in LA, when it came to marriage, I saw you had three options, AJ. You could be married and miserable, you could be divorced and desperate, or you could be single and cynical. And that's all I saw. And I was like, there has to be something different. There has to be a way. And call it, hey, I watched too many Disney movies. I went to Disneyland too many times. I believed in happily ever after. I believe that there's a way to have a thriving marriage and keep it thriving. I was like, there has to be a way. And so what I realized, like we tried to find this place to discover, AJ, like, okay, we're going to find it. We're going to discover this place. But it wasn't a place to discover. It was a place to be created by my bride and I's actions and our attitude, which is the only two things we can control, right?
Can you say that? Can you say that again? Can you repeat that?
Oh, yes. So the only things we can control are our actions and our attitude.
Okay.
So this correlates exactly to where we are with, okay, how do we resolve, right? Like this great police, what doesn't matter? Again, it's not a color, just the divide with police and us, okay? And it's the age-old question. It's the same in a marriage, right? Because again, most people think, well, there's only three options in marriage. And other people say, well, there's only these options in law enforcement, right? Us and them. Right? There's no justice. There's just us, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's all about me. It's me. I'm going to get mine. It's all about me and them, right? Not realizing that, that guy's a human being too. So it's that same mentality of, okay, what are my options? My actions, my attitude. So how can I carry that over to say, hey, how do we shift this narrative? And the only way to shift the narrative is what you're doing. Hey, I'm going to make a movie about this narrative. Hey, I'm going to write a book and we're going to talk about different ways to get this out there. And it's about the constant talking and exposure and just like, oh yeah. I mean, the greatest thing you could ever hear from anybody is, I never thought of it that way. And so that's the beginning of like, oh yeah. So I loved one of your co-authors when so for these that don't know, AJ is tireless in his working and his efforts, but he sets up these calls for the rest of the co-authors and we can connect and talk. And I still remember one of the co-authors was like, thanking you. Like, AJ, thank you. Because, for me, when I'm driving down the street and I see a police officer, all I can think is NWA, and F the police. And, thanks to you, right? It's like, oh, you've helped me look at it different and I help and do all these things. So I think that's the real answer of just continuing to talk about it, continuing to share a different narrative, continuing to challenge a narrative and have people go, oh yeah, I never thought of it. Oh yeah. And that's what's great about motion pictures, right? That's what's great about a movie is it lives forever. And it's a way, and it's timeless, right? It's this timeless story. Because it doesn't matter what era we're living in, anybody can turn on that movie, police officer or civilian, and be like, oh, wow. Like for me as a civilian, that was so healing. I was just like, man, I never thought of it that way. And then hearing the narratives that you never hear, I'd have to give some of the movie away, but I still remember the guy's story about like, hey, I wanted to help this kid. I wanted this kid to get home. And here he is drunk and disorderly and running red lights. And so rather than like, his mindset was like, oh, I got to crack down and get this. It was like, I saw this kid as my son, right? And I want this kid to go home. Hey, man, I don't want you to be a statistic. Hey, and it was like, wow, do police really think that way? Yeah, they do. But that doesn't sell books. That's not bad news, and bad news sells. So we don't get to hear that narrative. So long answer, short question is just continuing to change the narrative, continue to talk about different options. And if you look about any, and that's why my bride and I champion happy marriage. You know, when was the last time, AJ, you heard anyone say, yeah, I want to have a marriage of greatness? You know, you hear greatness in sports, right? The only thing on right now is the whole Michael Jordan. Yeah, Last Dance, right? And you know, that's perfect. Oh, greatness in sports. Yes, you know, we buy into that, right? We buy into greatness in business. Oh, and greatness in financial, right? But no one ever talks about greatness in a marriage. And so you and I are championing these same causes. Like, hey, let's talk about greatness in our marriage. Let's talk about greatness in police community relations.
Yeah, and it's almost unbelievable to say that there can be love between police and the community. Right.
Yes. And it does happen.
Yeah, I've had people who are in law enforcement, and I've had people who are in the community both tell me I'm crazy, right? But some of those people have come back to me after going through our programs and have said the exact opposite. They say, you know what, we can do this. We can have love. And by the way, I've formed relationships with so and so and so and so, and now they're good friends. Now they're like family. Right? So it's really just a matter of, okay, let's look at the possibilities, and then let's put the work in, because it doesn't happen overnight. It's not easy. Just like a marriage, it's not easy, but it's worth it when you put that work in. So I want to go to the next.
I got to share a win, because that's the other thing. You know, there are these wins with police community relations, but no one ever hears about it. And so I know there's one win where I actually participated. So I'm kind of the wacky, crazy ADD guy. So I have all these unique cars from different cartoons and television shows and things like that. That's what I'm into. So
like the Mach 5.
Yes. So we got the Mach 5 from Speed Racer. We got the Batmobile. I mean, that's just me. We're into that kind of stuff. So there's actually right near your house in Venice, at the Venice Depot, LAPD, Venice Depot, they do an event, a community event once a year, where they have like a Christmas thing where anyone from the community comes in. These kids go to the tent, and Santa is there to give them free gifts. And it's at the police department. So you're actually going to the police department, you know, where the stuff goes down, for something positive and something good. And then when you come out of the tent after you get your toys, they have this whole, like, they close out the parking lot, and we put a bunch of our goofy cars out there. And then they have these other tents and things for the kids to do for free. And it's this carnival of excitement and amazingness all at the police station. And so again, that shifts the narrative to be like, hey, you know what? There's good things that happen at the police department. But you don't see that on, you know, the local news. You don't see that getting broadcast. And I know there's other things that the LAPD has done, you know, of community relations. So I think that's the other thing we need to do, is when it is happening, talk about it and share it. Because again, just like with this whole pandemic, right? As soon as one state shuts down, the other one shuts down. And this governor, right? And then it's going to be the same way when it reopens up, right? We're waiting. Like Montana opened up last weekend. Hallelujah. Yay. So sooner or later, we're all going to keep opening. So it's that same department to department. So as love is the answer goes to one department, we'll get to the next department of, hey, I've heard this. So it's really about championing that good news, because we always tend to keep the good news to ourselves and tell the bad news. Right. And it's the same in a marriage, right? When you talk to somebody, how often do you hear people saying, oh my gosh, my wife is so amazing. You know, I call my wife my bride, and people are always like, your bride? How long you been married? I'm like, I've been married 27 times. So when you talk good about your spouse, great things happen. So as we talk good about our departments, instead of F the police, it's praise the police. So again, it's such, you think they're total opposites, but they're exactly the same. It's like, how do we shift the narrative to happy marriages? How do we shift the narrative to that greatness in police relationships by sharing the good news of it's farther along than we think. That's the other part. We think it's like, oh, it's impossible. No, it's not. It's already happening. It's just continuing to do those good things.
Yeah, we've got to put a focus on that. We've also there was a in your film they right the guy who's a brilliant spoken word artist. He one of the things that he said, and I wrote this down.
Hmm.
I don't know. He said I don't always write positive stuff because life isn't always positive, right? And that's a truth, right? And that's one of the things that we had to face when we made our film, and even with the book. In the introduction, I lay out, okay, why am I writing this book?
Hmm.
Why did we get to this place of wanting to do this work, right? And it's not all pretty, it's not all positive, because life
Yep.
isn't always positive, right? So if we're going to get to a place of reconciliation with each other, then we have to have truth before we get to the
Yes.
reconciliation,
Yes.
right? And along with being positive and looking for those wins and celebrating those victories, we've got to understand that there are some real problems
Oh,
out
yes.
there, right? And you know, I've experienced some, you've experienced some, but the key to it is, okay, what are we going to do with that information, that those happenings, right? So when we have learned, then what's the next step? And you know, that O in love is that next letter, and that's for open your heart.
Mm.
You know, open your heart to the other person, open your heart to the possibilities of change, open your heart to have empathy. And that's really what turned things around for me. Is after I experienced a string of really horrible incidents with certain police officers, I had a few other peace officers who were friends who were letting me know that they loved me,
Mm.
letting me know that they loved what they did, that they were serving their community. It kept me from feeling like they were all bad,
Yep.
right? And they also, not trying to do this, but subconsciously, they were feeding me information that allowed me to open my heart up a little bit to these possibilities that, hey, maybe they're not all bad. Maybe, in fact, most of them are really, really great people doing a great job. Um, so where do we go then, right? When we have that head knowledge, just like in a marriage, right? We learn things, but it doesn't mean much if we can't open our heart and have empathy and express that, you know, not keep it to ourselves, you
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah.
that's where I think a lot of us fall short. And you know, a lot of us feel like, well, if I tell somebody that I care about them, or if I act a certain way, they're going to see me as soft, right? And that supposedly that's not a good thing in police culture or in a lot of communities. But look, we got to do that. We got to open our hearts up and feel for the
Yeah.
other person, right?
Yeah, and what's coming up to me, you know, is again the correlation, right? Like we've,
Mm.
and it's so great now because actually people are talking about it, so you're hearing this more. But you've heard the phrase toxic masculinity, right?
Yes, yes, yeah.
You know, of just this, and there is toxic masculinity. It's not masculinity isn't bad, but there is toxic masculinity, just like there is toxic police officerness, right? It's that same kind, and again, it's those old mindsets and that old thing of saying, hey, how can I separate the toxicity, right? And understanding that they're identifying the toxicity of saying, hey, and I think there's, again, all it can come back to, again, coming back to the biggest room in my house is the room for improvement. Is, you know, same in a marriage, right? I could sit here and go, and I think you've been there too on the law enforcement side, where I'm not going to apologize until they do first. You know?
Yeah. Well, no,
Yeah.
I got nothing to apologize for. Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
I'm waiting on them
Yep.
to be the change that I
Yes.
wanted to see in
Yes.
the world.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And
And
I'm
yeah.
gonna sit here with my arms crossed until they bow down, right, and come like, oh, we're so right, like, and it can be the same in a marriage, right? Of this, like,
Yeah.
well, I call it the, you know, it's the doom loop in a marriage, right? Well, yeah, I'd be glad to do more for her around the house as soon as she, you know, does this, and this, or gives me more sex, right? And then the wife is the opposite. Well, I'd be glad to open up in the bedroom if he would just drive right, da, 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 da. And it's the same in police relationship, right? Well, as soon as they clean up their act, you know, then I'll start being a better citizen and start, you know, right, that whole thing.
Right.
So I think that you know, really comes down to saying, hey, that openness of really saying, hey, you know what? There's things I need to apologize for. And if
Yeah,
I'm just going to
that's
stand
right.
here and wait for them to apologize, you know what? I can complain all I want, right? Or I can just, you know, again, be that step up and say, hey, what can I apologize for? What do I need to work on? How you know, the classic, right? If you want things to improve, then you need to improve. If we want things to change, we have to change.
Yes.
And
That's right.
and it comes down to, you know, there's no acronym in love, but it just comes down to responsibility, of taking responsibility of like, hey, what do I need to take responsibility for? And, you know, the classic, right? Like my son, and we have these great discussions about like, okay, you know, it's grace and mercy for me, but justice for you. Let me give you a perfect example. So when I'm driving on the freeway and I'm going 80 miles an hour, you know, hey, you know, and a cop pulls me over and hey, come on, give me a break, man. Right? Like, I'm just trying to, I'm in a hurry. I was late for a meeting, you know, help me out, right? But if I'm on the freeway, right, and a guy zips past me, bust him, get him, right? He gets pulled over. You've been there, right? The blue light, you're cheering, right? Yeah, they got him. Justice, justice, justice for him, mercy for me, right? It's that thing, you know? And I point that out to my son because he's like, oh, yeah, Dad, I just want to do this and this and this. I'm like, oh, but if the neighbor went and did this and this and this, he's like, well, yeah, but that's different because it's not me. So it's really, and it's, again, you really think about it, but it's like, wow, you really mean I have to take responsibility for something? And we have to be that bigger person. And that, again, that harkens back to the previous podcast you had, right? Of like, what mindset are you going to fall into? Is it the MLK? Is it the Malcolm X? Right? Like,
Dee was great. She really broke that down.
Of all perspectives, right? Of like, hey, and I love what you said. You know, like I kind of lean on MLK, but you know, there is some value to the, you know, what Malcolm X was able to do and get people to take action. So
that's right.
But ultimately, it's about your action. So what can I do? You know, I can rise up and raise my fist, Malcolm X style, at myself and say, I need to take responsibility. I need to apologize. This is what I'm going to do. So, yeah, I could talk about that.
Well, that's cool. That responsibility, that's actually, you know, part of that V, that in L.O.V.E, the V is for volunteer, to be part of the solution, right? And in order to do that, we all have to accept some responsibility, that we have to be that person that's willing to step up and do the hard work, even if the other person never budges from their position. That's hard to do.
And that's the mindset of it. It's not about them. You know, regardless of what they're doing, you know, I'm going to do my part. But what I love talking about the V and the volunteer, going back to language, and as we go down this, you know, I love what Bob Goff said. He said, hey, let's stop calling it ministry and let's call it Tuesday. Right? Like, oh, I'm going to put my ministry hat on and I'm going to minister today. Right? And it goes back to this, like V, right? Like we get it. We put our volunteer hat on. Hey, I'm going to go volunteer. Right? Well, let's quit calling it volunteering and call it Wednesday. You know, what if we made it a lifestyle of being that volunteer? What if, again, if in order for things to change, we have to change. So instead of putting on the volunteer hat, let's throw the volunteer hat off and just say, hey, I'm going to be a lifestyle of volunteering. So in our marriage, I wanted to make it a lifestyle of cherishing my bride. And one way to do that is have a wedding every year, right? So it's like, how can we make this volunteering a lifestyle? My bride, you know, to her credit, she leads a convalescent ministry. And she has a heart for the elderly. I do not, but she does, right? She is, you know, she's got all the empathy. I was a little shortened on the empathy stick, you know, when they were handing empathy out. But that's her ministry, and she loves it. She has been doing that ministry, AJ, for 20 years.
Wow.
So it is a lifestyle. Our kids grew up, even in vitro, going to convalescent homes. So that is just a lifestyle. And we don't say, oh, it's time. Yeah, it's time to put on the ministry hat. It's just, that's just part of what we do is go to convalescent homes, connect with these people. So I think it's, again, for us and for people that are watching to say, hey, I want to make that change. It's like, hey, let's stop labeling it. Let's stop getting on our high horse and let's just make it a lifestyle of volunteering. And more is caught than taught, right? Especially with kids, right? Like we can lecture all day long, we can do the whole thing, but it's like people they just, I can't hear what you're saying, right? Because your actions speak so loud. So what if our actions spoke so loud that other people were like, wow, yeah, that inspires me. Oh, wow, yeah. So that's what I want to champion.
Well, that gets into that E in love for empower others to do the same. And the best way to do that is not to talk about it, just be about it. Right?
Yes.
Just be that example in their life that's going to make them want some of what you got,
Absolutely. And so when it comes to that side of things, this one really, really struck me, another Bob Goffism, but it's like, okay, if joy is a habit, then love is the reflex.
If joy is a habit,
love becomes the reflex. The natural reflex. Okay. Instead of my natural reflex, which is F the police, if I'm full of joy, then my natural reflex is love and empathy. And that really hit me again because I'm joyful sometimes. And I realized like, wow, I need to double down on the joyfulness. Because when I'm joyful, it's much easier to love my neighbor. When I'm joyful, the guy that cuts me off, I'm no worries, right? Yeah, it's cool. When I'm joyful, truly, then love is the natural reflex. And per you, AJ, since love is the answer, right? How do we make that reflex? And that's
how do you get there? How do you get there? How do you get to that place when life is hard?
Yes. So I'll go here for a second. So part of it is that, as from the male perspective, right? The prototypical male is mission driven, right? We're all about A to B. What's the mission, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So for me, success orientated. Another great author penned this one, Erwin McManus. He said, joy is the true measure of success.
Okay. And
that really resonated with me because once my possessions, right? We all go through that, right? Well, as soon as I get the new car, as soon as I get the new house, right? And then and you're like, ooh, gee, that's not where it's at. Okay. So for me, it's like, wow, if joy is the true measure of success, then, right, just the natural effect of that is, the habit, love becomes the reflex. But how I get there is going back to old school Zig Ziglar 101. I'm either up or I'm getting up. And it's pre-planned, right? So, AJ, you're of my demographic, right? I mean, you've aged a lot better than I have, but, harken back to Rocky, right? Like Rocky's mindset was go the distance, that whole thing. It wasn't, I'm going to win. It was, I'm going to go the distance. So his mindset is already, I'm going to go the distance. So the second Rocky gets knocked down, what does he do? He gets back up. Because he's already programmed, I'm going the distance. I'm going the distance. So I don't have to focus on what do I do when I get knocked down. I'm instantly getting back up because I'm going the distance. So for me, that it comes down to intention and pre-planning, AJ. So if, let's harken back to another classic UCLA great, right? We're going all LA stuff, but John Wooden, right? John Wooden said, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. Okay, so for all our sports people out there, right? If you have an opening, right? That's what's so amazing about the Bulls, right? It was like, boom, there was an opportunity, they seized it, all of this stuff, right? But if there's an opening, you got to think about like, where am I supposed to put my foot again? What's my position? Where am I supposed to be? Am I playing the 5 or the 4, right? It's too late.
Too late. Yeah.
So it's the same, like you said, when challenges happen, when bad stuff happens, when stuff hits the fan, right? So understanding that, hey, first of all, I already know when it hits the fan, it's going to splatter. So I've already got paper towels and the stuff set aside. So when it splatters, I don't go, oh, I can't believe it got all up, right? I'm already wiping it off with the paper towels because the paper towels are already there. So it's getting that preparation of already understanding that, hey, I already know challenges and this stuff is going to happen. So I need to already be prepared. So when it does, I'm already getting up off the mat rather than thinking about, oh, I just love to curl up and whine for a little bit. Because that is the natural tendency, right? Natural tendency is avoidance, anger. I'm going to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to blame, right? Blame and shame, right? I'm not immune to all that, but if I pre-plan, so you know, motion creates emotion, right? If I've already gotten up off the mat, you know, you know, there's no room for blame and shame and curling up in a ball. I'm already standing up, right?
Right.
So
That's right.
if I go into it, I'm either up or getting up, and the paper towels and all the Windex is already set up. So when it hits the fan, I'm already cleaning it before it dries.
Yes.
That's how I cope with it, by planning for it ahead. And the same on the positive, right? So if you're waiting for opportunity, if you're not prepared, you're going to miss it. So it's like, okay, I'm constantly, I love, I think Brendan Burchard put it this way, and it was so simple. I was like, duh. I was actually aggravated at it because it was so simple, but it made so much sense. So in today's time, right? Like, I'm stuck at home, all this stuff, whatever, you know, just put a little bit of paint on the canvas every day.
Yeah.
We all want to paint the masterpiece, right? You're like me, right? Oh man, I want to have this masterpiece, this beautiful thing. It's like, that's great, but just if I just put a little bit of paint on the canvas every day, right? So when did the lockdown start, right? It's been a month and a half, right? Pretty much, right?
Yeah.
So if every day I was putting a little bit of paint on the canvas, imagine how far I would be.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm not saying you don't have to, you know, you don't have to turn Netflix off. You know, you can still watch, but just put a little bit of paint on the canvas.
Right.
You know, every day. Yeah. And then another analogy that I love is you know, because I'm a sports guy, right? So let's give a sports analogy. And I want to give credit where credit is for these great quotes. Daniel Jeremiah said this. He said, you know, in sports, right, we all want to score a touchdown. We all want to get a first down. We already want to move the chains, right? But even if you move the ball an inch forward, AJ, you're making progress.
Yes.
So even if we're pushing it an inch, and I've had those days, right, where like, did the ball even move today? Right? Did we do anything, right? But like today, this is like a 20-yard bomb, right? Like sitting down with you having this talk, it's like, yeah, we moved the ball forward, yeah. And other days it's like, hey, a yard, an inch, but it's like, just move it forward a little bit every day. And that, again, is so when it does hit the fan, I can look back and go, man, look at all this progress. Look at all this stuff. And so it gets me out of that, just like everyone else, gets me out of the whining, wallowing, feel sorry for myself, all of that. Because if I don't, it's so easy to fall into that. So again, it's about pre-planning. So that's a long answer, short question, but I appreciate your listening ears.
Oh man, awesome. Omar Neal, who's one of the contributors to the book, he likes to say that you got to make your friends before you need them.
Oh yes.
Right? And so we talk about putting this work in, and you know, the thing is, if something goes down in my neighborhood, I'm not calling the guy down the street unless it's something really minor. If it's something big, I'm calling the police. And so I want to have a good relationship with them beforehand.
Yes.
Right. Make your friends before you need them. And, you know, and that's on all sides of that equation. There are folks in the police department that their job is to be community police people. Their community relations, they're going out and they're participating in all the events and things like that. One of the things I'm pushing for with every police department I work with around the country is make every officer a community relations person.
Yes.
Every single one of them. You don't have some folks riding around in the car not speaking to anyone and other people that are designated to be the officer friendly. You gotta, everyone's gotta be that way.
Yes.
And from the community's perspective, we've all got to be that person that thanks that officer for doing that work, for you know, for just saying, hey, you know, have a great day. Hey, be safe. Hey, thanks for serving the community. You know, because at the end of the day, we're all members of the same community. And I like to say in our workshops that we're Ohana, we're family.
Yeah. Yes.
You know? And we may not look like it sometimes, but we are. And we've got to treat each other like aunties and uncles and nephews and nieces and brothers and sisters.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the narrative today, right? It was so great. We're all in this together. It's like, that includes law enforcement.
Right.
Yes, right. It does.
Right.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned that really helped me, even before Love is the Answer, and I'll just share this briefly. What I realized, you know, you talked about some of the worst jobs, right, in the world. I think pastors and police officers, right? Because think about it. Every time the pastor's phone rings, every time the police radio goes off, it's something negative.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, the only reprieve from a pastor is, you know, you get that call, hey, will you marry us? But the rest of the time, it's my life's falling apart. This happened, right? So
Right.
if you think about every time the radio goes off, every time, so Pavlov and his dog, right? Conditioned response, right? Like, who calls the police to call him and give him a casserole and say thank you, right? That doesn't happen, right? So
Right.
you got understanding, like, every time they get a negative. And once I realized, I was like, wow, that would be really challenging. So again, for me, as a community relations, doing my best to be the community relations expert in my neighborhood, it's just that thank you.
Yeah.
And if I get a moment, I tell them, I say, hey, man, I understand every time the radio goes off, it's something bad, but I just want to let you know, hey, we appreciate you. There's still good people in the world. And they just, oh, thank you so much. Oh, we appreciate it. So yeah, I resonate with you 10,000 fold. And I see that in the faith community as well, right? In the church, right? It's like, oh, we have our greeters to greet people. Oh, so I don't know.
Right.
Right? I'm not a greeter.
That's their job.
Yeah, that's their job. Right. And I'm telling on myself, right? Because a lot of times it's about me, right? I want to go in, get my good music, my good seat. You know, it's about me. Mm-hmm. So I got to change my attitude to be like, hey, I need to step up and say hi to that person. I need to give them a smile. I need to give them a praise. And yeah, I love that mindset of like, hey, let's get away with the titles. We're all, you know, community experts. We all are the champions of that in our way that's unique to us. And that's the best part of giving people the freedom to say, hey, look, if you're not into baking, don't bake them anything. But if you want to make them something, if you want to put a sign, whatever's authentic to you, you don't need permission. Yeah. Go ahead and praise your local law enforcement. And that goes a long way.
Absolutely. Brother, I know we've been at it for a while. We're running up against the clock here. I hate to let you go, but I know you're busy as well.
That's a nice way of saying it. Evan, you talk too much.
Not at all, man. Not at all. Hey, anything that we missed? Anything else that you want to go before we? I do want to play a word association game with you.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Let's do it quick. Go. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm the deep dive. Let's talk. I'm like, you know, let's talk for the next 2 weeks. Right. So you got to get the cane and pull it out. But yeah, let's do quick word association. End up with something fun. Let's do it.
All right. So, you know, when I say something, just let me know what comes to mind. Something that you love. You know, ready?
I'm ready.
Favorite food?
Oh. That's my bride has
gonna be so hard.
No, it is because there's the foods that I love to eat that my body doesn't necessarily love. So it's like but I will say a go-to, just to keep it easy, a go-to is high-end dark chocolate.
Oh man,
super dark, super quality. I'm with you. I'm a chocolate guy, so yes.
I'm with you there, man. We, Jane and I, we distributed this chocolate at one time called Italo Swiss. Ooh. Don't go near it because it's addictive. I put on 10 pounds selling that. So I don't even know if I sold any, man. I think I ate it all. It was so good. All right. You've been to how many different places for weddings and honeymoons?
We have been married 26 times in a different state or country.
Man, so what's the favorite place out of all of them?
Ooh, don't have one. They're like kids. You love them for all the different reasons. But I'll give a sports one that was unique. I'll just talk about how I enjoyed the uniqueness and specialness. So for me, one of my favorites was a friend of mine used to be the coach of the Green Bay Packers, not the head coach, but a coach. Okay, Coach Woodfin, baby. So he hooked it up. So we got married at Lambeau Field in Green Bay, and he did the vows for us, and he married us in his coach's uniform with the whistle. And he did vows. So awesome. He did these vows where he's quoting these great quotes about love and togetherness. Yeah. And they're all Vince Lombardi quotes. So it was like, I'm getting Vince football quotes at my wedding. This is awesome. Yes. And then my bride's crying too, because it's all about love and all this. And so quick segue. So I wore my Super Bowl ring from the Packers. And this applies to exactly what we're going through with Love and the Answer and with police community relationships. So a lot of people don't know the core values, what the Packers actually stand for.
Yeah.
Packers stand for unity and greatness.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know that. They're one of the rare teams that, like, this is what the brand is about. It's about unity and greatness. And if you want to, do a case study on, police community relations, if you want to do a case study on how to build a church, you want to do a case study on, hey, how do we get different cultures to connect, right? Go to a Green Bay Packers home game. Doesn't matter what color skin you're wearing. It doesn't matter what jersey you have on. It doesn't matter if you get out of a truck with handcuffs and a orange jumpsuit on. It doesn't matter if you're from another planet. The first thing you're going to do when you walk in the parking lot is they're going to say, hey, brother, come on over. Have a beer. Have a bratwurst. Come on. Because it's what unifies us. That's their core. What unifies us, which is, hey, we love the game of football. And you may be for the other team, but we can unify on that we love this game. So it's all about unity and greatness. So how much unity and greatness do we need at this time in the world, right? How much unity and greatness do we need with police and civilians? How much unity and greatness do we need in our marriages, right? So I just want to carry that forward with the ring.
Man, that's awesome. I think we're going to close on that, man, because that drove everything home.
There we go.
Ravens. Go Ravens. Sorry, man.
Yes.
In there, brother.
No, you got to. Bring it.
Evan, man, thank you so much. It's been so great to be with you, and I can't wait until we can get together in person, hopefully soon after all this craziness is over with.
Yes. So AJ, again, an honor. Love the long format where we can actually open up instead of just soundbite, because the soundbite world gets old. So I love being able to see your heart, being able people to understand how much time, energy, and effort and tireless work you do in championing this cause. And I just, again, encourage everybody else to say, look, here's a dude that said, hey, this was something that angered me, that I was in the victim mindset of, but I decided to shift and rise up. And now I created this world-class documentary and to be part of the solution. I mean, hey, as cool as Michael Jordan is and as amazing as his efforts were, AJ, I think you deserve a golden ball. I think you deserve confetti. I think you deserve a championship ring for what you've done. No, I'm serious, dude. That's what true greatness is. Greatness is not being good at a video game. I'll leave you with this quote, and this is something I wanted to share. And, I love unity and greatness, but I remember Dennis Rodman sharing, like, hey, he says, I would play basketball for free. Playing basketball is easy. He says, the reason I get paid all this money is for all this off the court ish, all this stuff off the court, right?
Yes.
And so you talked about, life has a lot of off the court stuff. And it's like, okay, so what are we going to do with that? So to see you from your arc of like, hey, I'm pissed off, they need to change, to, hey, I'm going to change, I'm going to make a movie, I'm going to be part of the solution, is what greatness is all about. So I'm honored to be, again, with a man of greatness. So thank you, AJ.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. I appreciate you being part of the book. You helped make it special. And anyone who wants to get a hold of you, man, where do they go? Where can they learn more about you?
Oh, sure. So 2 fun dives. You can go to evanlovessusan.com with all, just all spelled out, evanlovessusan.com. You can see me with hair for wedding number 1 and 2. And you can get a lot. And there's some free resources and cool videos and fun stuff. Or if you want to go straight to kind of the personal growth, unity, greatness side, you can go to just evanmoney.com.
Awesome. And I hope for anyone who's with a community group, anyone in law enforcement, anyone in ministry, who's watching this, don't just reach out to me, reach out to these contributors to this book. Evan Money is a class act. He is powerful in how he can help groups and individuals transform. So reach out to him. Evan, thank you, man. I appreciate you. I love you. And I hope to see you soon. Aloha, brother.
Aloha noi, my friend.
Yeah. Be well. For all of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in. And you can learn more about us at loveistheanswermovement.com. All right. See you, man.
All right. Thanks, AJ.
All right. Thanks, Evan. Peace. Tell everybody I said hi, all right?
I will, my friend. Appreciate you.
All right. You too, brother. Peace.